Hello gainers, Ralphie here with some fitter philosophy, sharing the fitness, sharing some philosophy and trying to incorporate the two into one, which isn't such a bad idea, because the fitter our philosophy, the more practical and usable it is, and the more we can improve the quality of our life by the simple, fundamental principles of Stoic solid philosophy. If anything, it helps us iron out a few of the terrible mistakes that we can make when our life gets a little bit out of our control, or we make judgments which are not in our best interests, and goodness knows people do that all the time. But that is part of the experience of life. I have mentioned in the past that the purpose of life is to experience it, and we experience it by undertaking a journey over time which accumulates in growing experience, a growing sense of self, the world, and a greater perspective into wisdom and reality. And I know there are philosophers out there, and some very respected ones, who say that life is not a journey and that we're all basically the sum of our collective inheritance from ancestors and all that nonsense. But one must bear in mind that a lot of today's philosophers are yesterday's news when they make the mistake of getting too convoluted, too abstract and too complicated about things. If we keep things simple, if we keep things practical and accessible in our minds, all the better, because we can adjust and adapt as we go on. But we don't have to be particularly smart, intellectual or bright to organise a successful life. You'll notice this in old people, and I'm going to share a few thoughts with you. I have referred to elderly people disparagingly in past videos. I'm saying something like, there's no fool like an old fool, and I stick to that, because it's all very well for youngsters. We find them entertaining because of their naivety and the silly little mistakes that they can make, although they do inherently have an instinct for survival, most of them. And actually, a kid left to its own devices will display quite a lot of common sense, although in a childish way. But as we get older, we get the experience of life, and at this point we can adapt, adjust and change our attitudes accordingly to grow and develop personally. But when you encounter old people who have not done this, who have institutionalized their life in laziness, closed-mindedness and selfishness, what you will find is the old fool. These are the people who get old more quickly than others, simply because they're aging faster. They're not looking after their health. They're just keep going with their bad eating habits. They don't bother with exercise, but importantly, they don't exercise the mind. Even a short walk would make all the difference, but they become lazy, and they're lazy in the body because they're lazy in the head. They're out buying newspapers, they're out eating bad food loaded with sugar, and they've had a whole lifetime to learn how to improve things, and they've not taken advantage of that. And that is why it's always worth people watching. And the more you do it, the more you'll pick up in the detail. And the fact is that a post office or a chemist shop, you'll see the old people coming out. And I'm generalising slightly because there are exceptions, there are always exceptions. And there's nothing better actually than a lively, engaging, open-minded elderly person who has experienced life and connected with life and grown and developed from that, because there's so much we can learn from these people. They have not institutionalized and stagnated, but the others that do, we can learn as much from ignorance as we can from wisdom, so long as when we observe ignorance, we don't adopt it in ourselves. That's important. But life is a journey. The purpose of life is to experience it. But what about the objective? And that's where I want to conclude. The objective observation of some people who have lived their lives successfully and others who have not. The end goal is to basically transcend. We transcend this dualistic reality and we experience other realities beyond this. Religion tends to appropriate this philosophy. However, where it gets really interesting is when you examine a lot of the contemporary physicists, quantum physicists, astronomers, as the reality of the universe around us becomes clearer and unravels from its confusion and presumptions that we have, the more we can recognize the true nature of what is frequently termed as God, the more we can prepare for that in the quality of lives we lead, the more we can expect to transcend through the various stages of reality in an onward journey in space and time. And the conclusion is a destination that we're not aware of. But we don't really need to be aware of it. We simply need to go with the flow and experience what we're allowed to experience. And it's sometimes a little confusing, folk, for people, is just how simple life should be. And I'm going to conclude with this, I'm always impressed by those who get by in life with very little because they simply do not need much. They live simply, they eat simply, they drink simply, nothing's done to excess, there's no great lust for more money, more holidays, more this, that or whatever. These people have learned from life, and so should we. Life is a journey, and every journey has a road. We go down that road. A bit like this one here. I'll show you it right now. Good luck with your journey, gainers. I'll be back shortly with some more Fitter Philosophy.